Welcome back to the channel, guys. House of the Dragon has landed. It's flown in. Episode 1 is here. Thank you so much for your patience in waiting for this to come out and be edited. I've been very busy in the last week or so. I've had my son over and we've just been really busy with day outs, family commitments and all that jazz. I did watch episode 1 of House of the Dragon during that time, but it's taken me until now to put this together for you lovely people. So, House of the Dragon, it's the prequel show to Game of Thrones, as we know. I'm going to go through the pros and the cons, and just to give you a bit of a heads up on how I'm going to do this for the whole series, I will do an episodic review each week. So instead of what I usually do, I get to the end of each TV series, watch all the episodes, and then do a full breakdown of each episode and then an overall rating. Because this is going to be weekly episodic releases, that's exactly how I'm going to do the reviews. And then what I might do at the end of each, the last episode released for season 1, I will go in and do a review on my overall thoughts of the whole season. That's where I'm going for. But let me know in the comments, guys, what you think. Have you seen episode 1? Let me know in the comments. Just to dive straight into it, I liked it. I thought it was good. I didn't think it was spectacular. I thought there was elements that could have been better. But all in all, I did enjoy it. As a sort of pilot show, in terms of the new genre that it's going with, the prequel timeline to Game of Thrones. Apparently it's set 172 years before Daenerys. So that's the kind of time span that we're in at the moment. I really liked the character setup. There was lots of foreshadowing in this episode. Lots of here is what's to come. There's certain things that I would like to have seen different, and I'll go into that in a second. But just as a bit of a let's get straight to the point, I liked it. I thought it was a solid opening episode. And it's almost set up to be, it's almost like a dangling of the carrot episode. You're going to see a lot more character developments, hopefully. We're going to see a lot more carnage, a lot more drama. And for those of you that have read the books, that know the lore, that know the history of the Targaryens, shit is about to hit the fan. Shit is going to get crazy. Spoilers, for those of you that remember that episode with Joffrey talking to Marjorie in the Red Keep, and they were, I think it was the Sept of Baelor they were talking in, and he was talking about Rhaenyra Targaryen, which is the main character in this show. Spoilers about what I'm about to tell you, but for those of you that have seen Game of Thrones, you'll probably go, oh yeah. There's a little section in Game of Thrones where Joffrey's talking to Marjorie about the different Targaryens and how he's basically better than them, he's stronger, he's got more power, and he talks about Rhaenyra, who's the main character that we see on the screen here. She is becoming queen, and she's the daughter of Viserys. And essentially, Joffrey talks about Rhaenyra's demise and how she gets killed. Spoilers. He says that her brother kills her, or her brother's dragon specifically kills her, while her son watches her get eaten alive. So I think that is something we will see. I personally think that's something we're going to see at the end of this season, and I'm going to tell you as to why. Rhaenyra's the innocence. They call her, I think it's called like the purity of the capital or some shit like that. I can't remember now. She's got a very sort of soft, welcoming way about her. She's the lady of the people. And as we know with Game of Thrones, anyone that's the lady of the people often gets chewed up, often gets killed. The good people die in these shows, and they're not afraid to kill them off. So my personal sort of guess, my personal feeling is Rhaenyra is going to die at the end of this season. I think she's going to follow in the same footsteps as Ned. I think she's going to do all the right stuff, follow what her father said about being right for the people, being a just queen, doing her duty and stuff like that. And she really seems, I know it's only one episode, so it's hard to gauge, but she really seems like she's doing right by her people. She seems to be strongly connected to the Targaryen line in terms of how she is. She's very sort of assertive but kind, and she just has that determination about her that Ned Stark had. And look where he ended up at the end of season 1. I think the way they're going to grip us with this is it's going to follow the same path that season 1 did. Very slow build up, very sort of here's this person, we learn more about that character. So in season 1 we got an introduction to Cersei. We learned about Tyrion, the Lannisters, Jaime and Cersei having some bum sex. And then we also then moved into the Starks, what the Starks had to do with it. We learned more about the Baratheons, and that's kind of how this opening episode is. There's kind of like a jousting tournament, and you see different houses, not just the Targaryens, but the Tyrells are in there. They talk about Dorne and stuff like that. And obviously the Martells come off of back of Dorne, but I think this is before the Martells, because in the lineage and the history, two houses form at the end of a certain event, and that forms House Martell, which I won't spoil because that's probably going to be in this season as well. For those of you that haven't read the books, there's going to be a big shift in houses. There's going to be a big shift in control. And as we know, the slogan for this show is the biggest threat to the House Dragon comes from within, which just gives the absolute hint that there's going to be tension. We've already seen it in the brother of King Viserys. He is, I think it's Daemon Targaryen. He is going to be coming in hard. He's going to want that throne. He's got that arrogance about him, that air. Kind of reminds me a bit like Cersei. He's kind of like a mix between Cersei and Joffrey. Just absolutely does what he needs to do. Says all the right things, ticks all the right boxes. But behind the scenes, he's twisting necks of pigeons, that kind of stuff. He's doing that. He gives me that vibe. And the character's great. I love, just touching on the characters briefly, I love the introduction to all these characters. I don't think there's a bad character in there. I think the casting is excellent in this one. And let's just talk about the episode. Let's talk about why I felt it was good, why I felt it's going to be, in my opinion, it's going to get better. And I think this is just a taste of things to come. I'm very, very excited, as you can tell, that we're going to get a Game of Thrones type show again. I know everyone's pissed off about how Game of Thrones ended with season 7 and season 8, but get over it, guys. It happened years ago now. We've got to give it a chance. I'm still seeing comments out there like, I'm not ready to be hurt again and stuff like that. It's like, come on. This is different showrunners now. It's a different team of people. It's a different cast. The blessing we've got with this is, I think partly, there's two reasons why I think season 7 and 8 of Game of Thrones went so massively wrong in the end. The two main reasons for me were, one, they ran out of content. The books aren't finished yet. George R.R. Martin is still finishing that last book, and he needs to, but he's still working on it. He hasn't finished that last book, so we still haven't got that content. They didn't have that material to go by. It cuts off at season 6, which is literally where it nosedived. As soon as it got to season 6, the storytelling and the character arcs just absolutely took a turn and a nosedive. It's because they had no material to go by. They had to literally make it up on the fly. They had to write it. So I blame the writers. I absolutely blame the writers on that. The second point also is that the two deuces that did the shows, Vice and whatever his bloody name is, they ran off to Star Wars. They had a contract sealed for Star Wars, so they ran off to do that, and they tidied up Game of Thrones ASAP. They just kicked it out the door because they didn't have the time to commit to the new project in Star Wars and finish off Game of Thrones enough to give it justice. I felt it was rushed. So I think it was a combination of the two as to why it went so wrong. And the reason why I'm tying this into this series is because we've got the content, we've got the books. George R.R. Martin is firmly on board. He is invested in this. He is supporting the showrunners, the directors, and the directors and the showrunners this time around are listening. And don't get me wrong, I think right up until season 6 in Game of Thrones, they absolutely nailed it. It was the perfect TV show around. Still is to this day, in my opinion. If you're just counting seasons 1 to 6, it's one of the best, if not the best, TV show to ever air on our televisions. I think it's absolutely fantastic, not just because I'm a massive nerd of fantasy and I love dragons and I love all things of that nature, but just everything. The casting was brilliant, the storytelling, the actors, the dialogue, the humor, the dragons, the CGI. It just felt like it was a movie. Every episode felt like it was a full-blown AAA movie, and I think that's why that tailed off, in my opinion. But I think why I feel hopeful about this series is because we've got the content, George R.R. Martin's on board, and it's different showrunners, guys. There's different people running this ship, and I'm hoping that it's going to tell a different story, and I'm sure it will. But that's why I'm hopeful for this one, and this is why, in a way, this episode reminded me a little bit of episode 1 from Game of Thrones. That opening scene that we get in this episode where you've got the dragons flying over and the you get that. You get the whole Dance of the Dragon music. That was the opening scene. absolutely epic scale. There's castles, you see the Red Keep, you actually see King's Landing before it gets taken over by the Lannisters, basically. But even before Robert is king, you see it as it's a thriving sort of industrial city, but it's got like sort of natural aspects to it as well. It's just blooming with buildings. It's just full of life, and it's just nice to sort of go back to. We obviously know what happens to King's Landing because of the end of Game of Thrones, but it's nice to see what the original picture was, what the original plan was, and when Viserys was on the throne, shit was buzzing. You know, stuff was happening in the right sort of way. Very strong, very firm character, very, very assertive king, very open and listening to his counsel and stuff like that. And it sort of puts aside the whole Targaryens are ruthless. So you see this character that comes in that really cares about his family. He's really passionate about doing the right thing, even if it means stomping down idiots. He's not afraid to do that. And I think that's the sign of a true king. And it opens up that way. We sort of see strength in character, strength in number, strength in family. Then we get introduced to Daemon, then we see Rhaenyra, and then you start to see the sort of push-pull in terms of personality, and you think, oh, here we go. This is a Littlefinger type character, Peter Baelish. This is a Tywin type character, is going to be pulling the strings from above. We also see shades of Cersei in Daemon, in my opinion. He's got elements of Cersei in him. Just that ruthless, if you cross me, I'm pulling your dick off type attitude, which apparently gets you quite far in the Game of Thrones lineage. All in all, guys, I think this was a fantastic episode. I loved the dragons. Personally, at this stage, I didn't like the design of the dragons too much. I think the Game of Thrones dragons looked a lot better. However, what I like and what I'm looking forward to is we're going to see a lot more dragons in this. We should anyway. It's the Targaryens. They're running the roost at the moment. They're in the nest, and we should be seeing dragons flying left, right, and centre. Dragons should be flying around, dropping off cheeseburgers to people's houses. That's how much we should see dragons in this series. I don't want it rammed down my throat, but it's called House of the Dragon. If we don't see loads of dragons, it's a rip-off. Do you know what I mean? So this is where I'm going with it. I think we're going to see lots of different types of dragons. We've already seen Rhaenyra's dragon, which kind of looks like a weird sort of fire drake crossed with a worm type of thing, and I think we're going to see all sorts of species, all different lengths, sizes, but I think we're going to get a solid 3 or 4 seasons out of this. And if they go as far as Game of Thrones did in terms of the timeline, we could well see the Mad King, we could well see a sniff of the rebellion, and I think this is where I personally think this one's going to end. It's going to end pretty much sort of 20 to 30 years before Game of Thrones starts. So we're going to see Robert sat on the throne. I can just picture it now, the final scenes of the very last season of this House of the Dragon TV show. Robert Baratheon's going to be crowned. He's going to be sitting on the throne. We're going to see a very, very young Cersei sat there. We're going to see Tywin stood there. And it's going to cut to Daenerys being born. The final image is going to be Daenerys being born. And then it's going to be somewhat along the lines of, what's your baby called? What are you going to call your baby? And they're going to get a longing stare, and it's going to be Daenerys Targaryen, the mother of dragons, and then it's going to end. That's how I think this series is going to finish. Not this series, but the whole show. I don't know how many series they're going to push out, but that's my hunch and my prediction on where I think it's going to end. And I'm okay with that. It's going to tie in nicely to Game of Thrones, but what I would like to see in this series, particularly, is drama. We all came to Game of Thrones. We were all attached to Game of Thrones because no characters were safe. Our favourites, even Ned Stark, who was on the front of the fucking DVD case, by the way. I bought the DVD and I thought, this looks great. It's got Sean Bean in it. This is going to be epic. Watched it all the way through to the end of season 1, and the poor fucker gets his head lopped off. And I thought, they've put this guy on the front of the DVD case. If these people are not afraid to kill off the poster boy who was on the front of the DVD case, this is the kind of show I want to be invested in. And then nobody's safe. You've got that element of, at any point, anyone can die. When Tywin gets shot on the bog with Tyrion, you think, yeah, there's all that passion, that hate there, but he's not going to kill his own dad, is he? He does him in with a crossbow. It's that sort of push-pull. The Red Wedding, another shocking moment in Game of Thrones. It's just, that's the stuff I want to see, the stuff I want to hear in this season. And I'm trying to go cast my mind back to the lore of where we are now in the House of Dragon in sort of the timeline. I'm trying to think about the big drastic things that happened. And there is a few, but not as much as what we got in Game of Thrones. So, it's either going to go one or two ways. It's either going to be completely canon, and they're just going to flesh out a lot of the story, which I don't like the sound of, or they're going to stick to the canon stuff for the main storylines, i.e. who's on the throne, who kills who, how that happens, but they might go a little bit off-piste with some of the drama, so we might get an additional actor in, we might get an additional house in, which will just shake things up a little bit. I think if we get that sprinkle of, yes, we know what happens by the lore of the history of the books, but this has now happened as well, which is slightly different to the book. That's going to give us a bit of tension and a little bit of something to look forward to. Where are they going to take this? This sounds like a new direction. This looks like something they're going to change. How are they going to map that out? That's the kind of stuff I want to see, personally. But if they stick to it being completely canon to the books, they stick to it being completely true to the history, I'm okay with that, as long as, please, dear baby Viserion, that the delivery on it is perfect, because it needs to be. If you're going to stick to the content, it needs to be, and it should be. You've got the main man in there. Mr. Martin is behind the scenes. He's helping the showrunners with this show, so there's no reason why it shouldn't succeed. If you've got the right writers in, you've got the right showrunners, the cast, which all seem great at the moment, but obviously it's still very early days. If you've got the right director and you've got the man that put together the source material, you should be absolutely on point. You should be banging. You should have no worries whatsoever. Really, really liked it. It's very much a foreshadowing episode, just to cover quickly on what it's about. I'm sure you've all watched it by now, but it's very much a foreshadowing episode of things to come. We get introduced to Rhaenyra. We get introduced to Viserys, who's the current king, sat on the throne in King's Landing. We get introduced to a couple of dragons. The music is epic. The opening theme, Dance of the Dragons, and also they ended it perfectly. When the credits rolled, they put in the Game of Thrones theme tune. That's there. Just a little bit of remix, a little bit more additional instrumental stuff added in, but it's there. And that, for me, put hairs on my arm. The hairs on my arm stood on end. I was like, yes, we are back. We are back in that zone. I forgot what that felt like when those credits run and the show starts. You get the HBO sign at the beginning. You get the introduction music. It was another level, and you just know you're about to watch something really, really incredible. That is back. That's something I really liked. There was a very disturbing scene where someone got their knob cut off. I kid you not. But bum sex and knobs being cut off is back. I'll leave you guys to watch the episode. I won't spoil a huge amount, but basically Daemon Targaryen goes on an absolute rampage. He's trying to basically cull all the idiots, the people that stood up against any kind of laws, the thieves, the rapists. He literally points at a guy and says rape her or something like that, and then the next scene is him being held by the soldiers and his pants being pulled down and his knobs being cut off like a piece of cheese. But it's just the tension, the drama, the oh shit, what the hell's going on. There's a few of those moments in there. So obviously not being cut off. There's also some sex scenes in this, so a lot of people appreciated the honesty and the originality of the sex scenes in Game of Thrones. That is in there, although poor Daemon is struggling to get himself in the mood. The third and final scene, which was pretty gruesome for me, something they haven't shown before, is Rhaenyra's mum. I can't remember her name, the queen consort basically, or queen regent, I think it's queen consort. She's giving birth, and the doctors basically say to Viserys, there's only one way this is going to go. We either save your wife and the baby dies and there's a risk that the baby will die, or we give her basically a C-section. We can save the child, but through the bleeding and the stress, it's very likely that your queen, your wife, will die. And it's a horrible, horrible decision to make. And you do see the sort of the worry, the conflict on Viserys' face. The acting in that scene where he's been told he has to make a decision is absolutely fantastic. I absolutely bought into it. I felt for him. I felt sad. I felt like angry. I felt, all the stuff that a person in that situation would feel. I absolutely felt it just by looking at his face. He didn't really say much in response to it, but that's when I know you've got a good actor in the books, when they can just portray all the emotions that they want us as an audience to feel without saying a single damn thing. I think they've absolutely nailed it. And I thought, Jesus. And there's a very gruesome scene after that where they're essentially cutting the baby out from the stomach, giving them a C-section. And it's, as you can imagine, it's quite gruesome, blood everywhere. And unfortunately, the queen does pass away. And then she cuts to a scene where she's sort of, they're putting arrangements together for her to be buried. There's also then a really positive scene. It comes down to who's going to be next, who's going to be the next heir, who's going to be the next person in line. And through the whole episode, we kind of flick between Daemon and Rhaenyra. So Rhaenyra is the daughter of Viserys, and Daemon is the brother. So you've got the uncle and the niece at the moment, sort of vying for the throne. But Rhaenyra's not really vying for it. She's just going about doing her thing. She is definitely a princess of the people. And Daemon's just out there cutting dicks off. He's just going ruthless. People are afraid of him. People know he is assertive, he is strong, he is dominant, but he gives off the wrong vibe. So a lot of people are passing on the favour of Rhaenyra, and obviously the King Viserys is seeing both sides as well. He's seeing how Daemon reacts to certain situations and how Rhaenyra does it. And the end of the episode, basically, how it's rounded off is there's a conversation that Viserys has in the sort of basement or the dungeon of the Red Keep. They're looking at a statue, and they just talk about what a good king or queen does. And then he's basically prepping her to become queen. He says what she needs to do, talks about the right and wrongs of the world, talks about that, sometimes you've got to make decisions people won't like you for, but you've got to do it for the good of your city, good of your people. And it's quite a touching scene. But then it sort of ends with him basically giving the nod to Rhaenyra that she's going to be queen. And up until that point, there's not been a female on the throne. No one's ever even thought about it. It's always been, obviously, the male becomes the heir. And that's pissed off Daemon massively. So the news goes back to Daemon that Rhaenyra is going to take the throne when the king dies. Daemon naturally kicks off, goes into the throne room and says, what do you think? You're disgracing our name. A woman has never sat on the throne. What's your problem? And they basically have a to-do. He basically kicks him out and says, I don't want you anywhere near me. This is the reason why you're not going to be king. It's all about power for you. It's all about this. It's all about your dominance. You've wanted this since I came here. They have like a to-do. There's obviously a lot of history between them, but the king sees straight through Daemon. He knows what Daemon wants. He knows he wants the throne. He wants the power. But Daemon in himself, almost like an Anakin to Darth Vader type arc, he sort of knows there's darkness in himself. He knows that power is getting to him, but he also doesn't know what the next step is. Does he step away? Should he step away? No, I'm entitled to this. I've worked for that. I've earned that. I took back that castle for you. I've sort of done this to these people. I've done everything you've asked me to, basically. And it's put him in a bit of a predicament with his brother, who is unfortunately the king. So they have a bit of a to-do. He kicks him out and says, you're done for. Get out of King's Landing. I don't want to see you again. And Daemon just sort of gives the I'll be back sort of thing. This ain't over. And then he walks away. So there's obviously, if you've watched the trailers for the series, you'll see that there's a point where Daemon confronts Rhaenyra and confronts, I think the king's still alive at this point, might not be, but he confronts Rhaenyra. So there's going to be a clash of siblings. There's going to be a clash of family members. And it goes back to that sort of punchline that the only way the House of the Dragon is going to crumble is from within. So I think this is what's going to happen. There's going to be a bit of a rebellion. Daemon's going to rebel against the crown. He's going to go after Rhaenyra and say, I am the true heir to this throne. You're a woman. You're not entitled to it, nor should you be. I've worked for this. You're just a beautiful little princess that just sort of bats her eyelashes and walks around and just automatically gets it just because you're the daughter's king and daughter of the king. I've done X, Y, Z. So I think it's going to be a look at my CV, it's longer than yours type of conversation, but he's also going to go in pretty heavy-handed as Daemon does. We've already seen a lot of his character in this episode, and he doesn't give a shit. He will do whatever it takes to win. He will do whatever it takes to claim glory for himself mainly, but also for the Targaryen name. He doesn't want that tainted at all. So, yeah, there's a very gruesome scene where Viserys saves the baby, and the Queen unfortunately dies. The two highlights for me in this episode, there is a couple of Easter eggs in this episode as well, but the two highlights for me, the first one where the Queen gets sort of cremated, she gets put on a pyre. In true Game of Thrones fashion, she's going to get set alight because she goes on into the afterlife that way, all that kind of thing. And we see a dragon in the background, and it's Rhaenyra's dragon. And it's sort of hanging around in the background, just giving a little look. And then she sort of looks at it, looks at the pyre, and we're like, yes, she's going to say it. She's going to say it. She goes to say something, and then someone mentions something to her. She stops. Dragon goes a little bit closer to the pyre, walks towards it. She looks at the dragon, and she says, DRACARYS. And then the dragon sets the pyre on fire. I was like, yes, DRACARYS, come on. It's just bringing back all that homage, all that love that I had for the original show, Game of Thrones. I absolutely, to this day, it is still, even with season 7 and 8, it is still my all-time favourite TV show. I think it will be. I don't think anything's ever going to top it. I might be wrong. But it's just got that Lord of the Rings feel to me. You know, Lord of the Rings is my favourite all-time movie franchise. And the Game of Thrones is going to remain as the TV show franchise of all time for me. And that just brought back how I felt when I first watched Game of Thrones. All the words, all the punchlines, the epicness of it all. It just drew all those feelings back into the present. And I thought, you know what? This show's going to be awesome. The second thing I really liked is we got a very quick glimpse at the Valyrian steel dagger. So the dagger that ultimately Littlefinger gives to an assassin to kill Bran, and it goes full circle. It goes hand to hand. It goes to Tyrion. It goes to Catelyn Stark. And throughout the whole show, we sort of try and work out whose dagger this belongs to, and it ends up being Littlefinger's dagger. We know who it's come from, why it's there, but this dagger is in the show. We get a very quick glimpse of it. Viserys has got it, and he talks about the dagger bringing an end to winter. He keeps mentioning sort of ice and fire, and that's also mentioned as well, guys. He says about, you know, there's a poem, there's a song about ice and fire, and that's what the books are called. The George R.R. Martin books are called A Song of Ice and Fire. It wasn't originally called Game of Thrones. The homage to it is Ice and Fire, or A Song of Ice and Fire, and it basically starts with, I think it's Aegon Targaryen has a dream about a dagger being used to defeat the White Walkers. He has a dream about the White Walkers, and he dreams about everything that happens in Game of Thrones in terms of the White Walker sense. So how they take over people, how they sort of spread their influence, how they just go from city to city, destroying and basically manipulating and changing people into these horrible walking zombies, basically. And Aegon sort of dreams up this idea that a Valyrian steel is the only thing that can kill the White Walkers, which is why he forges this Valyrian steel dagger. And as history tells us, it gets all the way to Arya. Arya is the one that puts down the Night King with the Valyrian steel dagger that Aegon dreamt would end the war, or the long night, as he calls it. So I thought that was pretty cool. It was a nod, a bit of an Easter egg to something that we know happens in Game of Thrones, but they're just sprinkling in little seeds of, this is where it starts. They're planting the seeds now, and I would imagine as the season goes on, and if there's further seasons that come behind this one, we will start to see those seeds flourishing into a bit of a storyline. So, and it'll tie in nicely to what we know happens in Game of Thrones. But all in all, guys, there was a couple of little things as well. I like the mention of the gold cloaks. The gold cloaks aren't in this per se, but the Targaryen Kingsguard have sort of half white, half gold cloaks. And there's a line that I think it's Daemon, or it could be Viserys, says they will feel they will. There's a line in this that Daemon or Viserys says they will fear the color gold. And as we know in Game of Thrones, the Kingsguard have gold cloaks, and they're called the gold cloaks. They're the most loyal bodyguards to the king. So I'm wondering if that is also a little bit of a seed being planted in terms of where the gold cloaks come from. And if it is, I thought it was a really, really nice touch. Something I just picked up in the background as I was watching it. But for me, guys, all in all, I think this is a solid opening episode. There's a couple of things I would like to have seen a bit more of. One particularly, more dragons. I know they don't want to ram dragons down our throat, but it would have been nice to see a little bit more dragons in this. character-wise, story-wise, I was very pleased with it. I think this is a very good foreshadowing episode. As we look back to Game of Thrones, the very first episode was very much like this one. Introduction to characters was the key thing, and if you're going to have a show like this, where characters are everything, you have to have, especially, and I do agree, the opening episode needs to be all about those characters. You need to come away from that episode feeling like you know their wants, you know their needs, you know what side they're batting for, what their personal interests are, what they're here to do, so that in future episodes, where you get a storyline or an event where you think, yeah, Daemon's definitely going to do that, the showrunners could then actually go, do you know what? The audience is going to anticipate this. Let's spin it on its head and kill him off. Do you know what I mean? That's what made Game of Thrones so great. The show writing was absolutely a star. It was just, even if you thought someone was going to die, sometimes they didn't. And people that you absolutely didn't expect to die, Robb Stark, Catelyn Stark, Ned Stark, and they all die at like the points that you do. First of all, they're not going to die, and then second of all, they die at the points you absolutely least expect it to. There is no heads up, there is no projection of it happening. It just happens, and often it happens in the most brutal way possible, i.e. the Red Wedding. And I still think to this day, that is one of my all-time shocking moments in Game of Thrones, where I did not see it coming. I literally sat there with my head in my hands, gobsmacked. My jaw was swinging on the floor. I could not believe what I was witnessing. They killed off 3 of the main characters in the space of about 6 seconds. I just couldn't believe it. And it just brought me back to that very first episode, the ending of the first season, especially, where you've got, this is Ned Stark, he's going to be the poster boy, you know, it's all going to be around the Starks and how they come back into power and how they do the right thing. No, Ned Stark gets his bonch chopped off, and then at the end of the first season, that's how it ends. He gets his head cut off, and then you come away thinking, what the hell is this show? There's no safety in these characters. But that is what adds tension, and that is what adds drama. Nobody is safe. Anything can happen, as Cersei said, when you play the Game of Thrones. So I think this is going to be, hopefully, the same formula, the same recipe. I hope they're going to kill off some serious characters and bring back that whole nobody's safe, nobody's got plot armor, people are vulnerable and people will die. They need to bring back that tension. And I know we know who survives because we see who sat on the throne later on in Game of Thrones. If you've read the books, you've looked up the lore, you know who survives, who surpasses who. What happens to Rhaenyra, we know that. We know because Joffrey said it. It's already there. It's almost like a future spoiler in Game of Thrones. He already talks about how she dies. But let's throw in some drama. Let's throw in that amazing storytelling that we got from Game of Thrones. And I think just by looking at this episode, we are going to get that. It left me hopeful. It left me wanting more from these characters. I loved the opening scene where we got that massive sort of scale of the dragon swooping in, and it really sets the scene in King's Landing. They talked about Dragonstone a little bit. We got introduced to some amazing characters. Daemon is going to be an absolute asshole, but in a great way. Rhaenyra is going to essentially replace Daenerys, I think. She's going to be the Daenerys of the show, but I think we're going to get a very big shock with Rhaenyra. I think the way that this first season is going to end with her dying, as I said earlier, I think she is going to be gone by the end of this first season. Then the second season, if they do one, is just going to go absolute batshit crazy. And that's kind of what happens in Game of Thrones. The whole Ned Stark thing was brought on by Littlefinger. The only reason Ned Stark really died was because Littlefinger was basically shit-stirring and making stuff up, lying and pointing fingers and turning people against each other. And also the whole of Robert's rebellion. That was all built on a lie, which Sam Tarly tells us about later on in season 7 when he's talking to Jon Snow in the crypt. He says to him, you know, the whole rebellion, the whole Robert Baratheon, all that kind of stuff, his rebellion, everything, the houses being split, the north, the south, everything that happened after that, because he went shit crazy and thought Rhaegar abducted his beloved Lyanna Stark, but he didn't. That was all built on a lie, and as we find out later on, Jon Snow was the rightful heir the whole damn time. But I just think this show has that ability to do exactly that. It has the ability to shock. It's got the right people behind it. I'm really pleased with the cast. The music sounds excellent. The opening scene gave me goosebumps. The credits gave me goosebumps when we got that whole Dance of the Dragons theme, and the Game of Thrones theme was mixed in there as well. I thought, yes, we're back. This is it. I'm willing to let the past go. I'm willing to let season 7 and 8 go. And I'm going to go out there now and say, I don't think it's as bad as you guys are saying it is. I might have just fell way too far in love with the show to just be blind to it. But when you go back and look at what Daenerys did, why she did it, it's completely justified. I would like to have seen it drawn out a little bit longer. It felt like a little bit too quick for me. Definitely there was too much plot jumping. Completely disagreed with the way they handled Jon Snow as well, but it is what it is. But all in all, I think it was okay, but the way they did it was not okay. I think the story they were going with, Daenerys going mad, she's basically gone full circle and she turned into something she always swore to never be. But because she lost her best friend, she lost Jorah Mormont, two of her dragons were killed, which are essentially her children. Sunday had her head cut off in front of her whilst chained up, even though Cersei said she would give her mercy. All that's going to drive anyone crazy, but I agree. I think the way it was delivered could have been done a hell of a lot better. But like I said, it didn't help that the people that were in charge of the show essentially did a runner and went to the fire exit because they had to go to Star Wars, so that didn't help either. But anyway, enough Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon, so I really, really liked it. If I was to give this a rating, it's probably a solid 8 out of 10. I'm looking forward to episode 2. Like I said, guys, what I will do is weekly episodic review videos. Let me know in the comments what you think. Do you agree with what I've said? Do you disagree with anything that I've said? Did you like the show? Did you like the opening episode? I personally did, and I'm looking forward to see what happens in episode 2 and all the future episodes. Have you got any predictions? Do you know how this season's going to end? Where do you think it's going to cut off in terms of the timeline? And is there any gripes that you do have? But hopefully you've enjoyed the video, guys. If you did, please do leave a thumbs up, and why not consider subscribing to the channel if you are brand new. I will see you again next week for episode 2's review. Until then, stay safe and DRACARYS. Peace out.